Today, I'm going to go through the 4 or 5 different types of disorders that I typically work with in this building, and then talk specifically about the strategies that you can use in your classrooms. I will have a little bit of a video, and I've got a little group exercise that you can work on to keep you awake, because Carrie promised me that there would be some food, and that would help you stay awake today. But
I
hopefully
didn't lie, I promise. I really thought they were coming to me.
hopefully this will help as well.
That wasn't a catch and bait rule.
Have a minute to get these going. And I wasn't going to say anything, but I was thinking about Carrie's email today, and what a lovely email it was, because it was so descriptive and so full of visual language that I could really take in, and I could see her family, and I could see them enjoying all the food, all the wonderful food that they had, and the special games that they played, and then kind of put that into the context of the students that I work with, and how challenging that is for them just to convey, not even in an eloquent way, the things that they've experienced over the last couple of weeks, or the last couple of days even. How much of a challenge that is for them, and I try to put myself in that situation where I imagine what it is that they are able to share with their family, and what meaningful experiences they can have with the level of communication that they are gifted with. So from there, what I try to do is always use that perspective and drive them up just a little bit at a time to the next level. So a little off topic, but everybody's got their PowerPoints now, so there we go. I think I gave you a little bit of a preview, but specifically we're going to talk about what kinds of students I work with, and what kinds of students that most speech pathologists help with, how I deliver services in the building, and when you can expect to see me. How does a student qualify to receive speech-language therapy, when a student is ready to be discharged from therapy, when a student should be referred for speech-language evaluation, and then finally what I can do, not me, but what you can do in the classroom to help the students that are struggling with communication disorders. I have to tell you just a quick short story about a few years ago. We were sitting at our speech-language meeting, and the therapist started talking about speech-language therapy and how stodgy a word that is, and really in many ways not a very good description of what we do, because what it ends up being turned into is speech therapist, because that's a lot easier to say. And I can say from my experience, about 80% of my caseload is not focused on speech, or what we would also call articulation. So I think it's really kind of a misnomer, and I wish I could change the name for everybody, but I can't do that. So you might notice on my signature I put communication specialist, because what I'm really working on is that communication piece. Specifically working on communicating thoughts, ideas, and on a lower level, just simply wants and needs. Can I have a drink of water? Can I go to the bathroom? Can I have that toy? Or on a very basic level. So in terms of ideas and thoughts, those are the things that you typically address in your classroom. What are your ideas about what started the Civil War? What are your ideas about the writer that you just read? How can you compare character A with character B? So all of the academic things that you do that are on the thoughts and ideas level are also things that my students will struggle with significantly, specifically if they have a language impairment. So then I also wanted to mention that we have the different areas of focus on language. This is an ability to express information and receive information. So you're interpreting information that's being spoken by the teacher, information that you're hearing from your peers, you're interpreting directions, you're listening to people, but also the expression. Am I detailed? Am I organized enough for for other people to understand what I'm talking about? And can I tell people things in a certain order that they need to be told so that those ideas make sense? Also articulation, which was the small percentage of the population that I say that I work with. Those are the folks that have difficulty with R's and S's and TH's, and they can't put their tongue in the right place, or they stick it out too far, or they round their lips or do something different that's going to make their speech sound different in some way, which can lead to some intelligibility difficulties, like the speech will not be understandable or intelligible. Fluency of speech. I emphasize the word fluency on there because I've noticed many times that fluency of reading can be confused with fluency of speech. And I have a tendency to be in my narrow speech world, and I'll say fluency, and I don't necessarily mean fluency, I mean stuttering. So fluency of speech is basically students who stutter. Pragmatic language, which is the social aspect of communication. So that would be turn-taking, conversation, etc. I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm going to go into further detail in a minute. So in the area of language, when I'm talking about comprehension and expression, the things that I focus on are, number one, self-advocacy, because I want students to be able to ask for help when they need it. Next is awareness of their IEP and their goals. A lot of students, by the time, before they've gotten into middle school, most students don't really understand the idea of having an IEP. And then some parents and maybe even some teachers feel like the IEP should be kept down on the hush-hush. But if you do that, then you run into the problem of the student not understanding that they have difficulties. And then the next piece in that line is that then they don't have any motivation to work on those skills that they're struggling with. So I really make an effort to help my students understand what their goals are and why they have those goals and what we're reaching for. I try to make sure that our lines of goals, our reaching line is very evident so that they work hard to get there. So I'm thinking about conveying to the students why they're there and how they can reach their goals. That's really, really important to them. So I wanted to point out also that on your class lists, you have access to this information as well. If you look at if you see a flag on your class list on Infinite Campus, then you can go into Infinite Campus and look at the SAS, or the Supplementary Aids and Services. The Supplementary Aids and Services are going to tell you the things that you need to do in the classroom to help your students. Things like slowing down delivery of presentation, using visuals, scaffolding information from concrete to abstract, helping in just the specific things that you can do. If you have a student in your classroom who stutters and you don't know exactly what to do, one option is to go to the SAS, that flag, or you go to the flag on Infinite Campus next to the person's name, you go into their IEP, and then you travel down towards the end of the document, and you've got SAS, which is Supplementary Aids and Services. And then we'll work on main idea. We work on vocabulary. Specifically, I will focus on Tier 2 words, and those are the words that you kind of, as a teacher, expect people to know already. Things like prediction, and let's make a sequence, and let's outline this. But my students often don't understand that vocabulary quite yet, for one reason or another. And then we work on the relationships of vocabulary words, why they fit into certain categories, what the opposites are, what the synonyms are, and if you put words together, how you can draw an inference from what they're all connected to. So we work on a lot of word relationships kinds of ideas. And then word retrieval strategies. How can I remember certain words? What are the things that are going to help trigger my recall of information? So word retrieval. Understanding context and ambiguous language. So ambiguous language could be the use of a word that has two meanings, or it could be something that has an emphasis that they've never heard before, so it's not going to make any sense to them unless they understand the context of the situation. So we help them understand the context better. Figurative language, just expressions that we use all the time that just don't make any sense. and then problem solving, reasoning, drawing conclusions, and making inferences. And the last thing I do is I will also, this isn't the only of the last, but this one of the main things that I do is working on comprehension. What are the most important things? Why is that the most important and not something else? One of the things that I find students at this age often do is they will draw inferences before they even have all the facts. So I will spend a considerable amount of time helping them find facts rather than jump to conclusions. So that's one of the other things that we do. So comprehension, again, there's some overlap with reading here, which I think is really interesting. So comprehension in your classroom, ooh, I understood the directions, ooh, or I understood what I just read. But before that comes, I understand what I heard, usually. And that makes the reading piece a lot easier for students if they understand, if they have that prerequisite skill, which is the comprehension of listening. So these are some things that you can actually do in the classroom. These are things that I do with students while I'm in the classroom and try to help them out with it. But I will break assignments down into smaller pieces. Make sure that they receive one task at a time. Explain unfamiliar and tier 2 vocabulary, things that don't make sense to them. Because a lot of that tier 2 vocabulary has to do with what directions you're giving a student. So you may say, in 8th grade, you may say, outline the steps towards the Revolutionary War, right? And they have no idea what outline is. And they're not quite sure how to do that because they don't understand the vocabulary, not because they don't know, you didn't do a great job teaching, or because they don't know the material, but because they don't understand the directions. So we have to go back to the direction words and make sure that they understand all of those specific pieces. And you can see there are some other ones. Prioritize. I know that's one that's used a lot. Paraphrase. Resources. Words like, that's a 6th grade word, I think that's used quite a bit. But even resources is a word that I've seen several students just don't really have an idea of what that is. So we're kind of working through that. Another thing that you can do, and I try to do, I have to monitor myself all the time to make sure that I slow the rate of my speaking so that I'm not speeding through something and that is at a rate where they can understand me. Use your microphone. I'm not using it in here, but if I had the opportunity, I definitely would do it. Research has shown that the use of the microphone in the classroom not only improves the learning outcomes for students with language disabilities, but it also improves the outcomes, the testing outcomes for students without language disabilities. So it helps all the students in the classroom receive information in more depth. So I highly recommend it, and if you have any, if you have any concerns or questions about it, or, thinking about the use of the microphone, a lot of teachers say, well, I'm loud enough. But what happens when you use the microphone is, I was going to say microwave, when you use the microphone, you change the tone and the intensity during lecture time as compared to I'm just talking to you time. So that often changes the focus of the students so they know when it's important to pay attention. So I know that we do that naturally, but if you're not using a microphone, it's a lot more subtle. When you use the microphone, it becomes very pronounced, and there's no guessing work for them in terms of when do I need to pay attention and listen to this information. So that's my plug on the microphone. Please use your microphones. Please, please. It really helps. Asking the students to repeat directions so that they don't get started wrong and get too far off track. How frustrating is it when you filled out a form and you've gotten all the way to the bottom and you realize you've done it all wrong? How frustrating that is in our daily lives, just as frustrating for them. But they get started on an assignment, they get 30 minutes into an assignment, and then the teacher swings by and they take a look and they go, uh-oh, that's way off. So we need to redirect you and get you on the right track. What I like to do more is to kind of check in with them shortly after they've received an assignment from a teacher, just to make sure that they've got it from the get-go and that their skill they need that check for their ability to understand the directions and for their self-confidence, just to know that they're capable of starting an assignment, getting put on the right track, and that they continue to feel good about the academic piece of what they're doing. Next thing is paraphrasing, putting things in their own words, using more simplified language so that the students understand what you're describing, making sure that the vocabulary isn't at too high a level for that student. And oftentimes I'll find that even students without language disabilities, some of the vocabulary is being used to bring them up to the next level, which is fabulous. And I know that, for many of our students, they need that. But I don't think it hurts to paraphrase and, use that more complex vocabulary or that higher level expected academic vocabulary. As long as we go back off to the side and use our little sidebar comments and talk about what that vocabulary actually means. It makes it a lot easier. Next thing is scaffolding. You all do it all the time. You take them from one level to the next level. Drawing pictures, and my students will laugh if you ever ask them about how I draw pictures, because my pictures are horrible. But my pictures are a concrete representation of the idea that I'm trying to express to them. And so I'll take the time to just hand draw something out if I haven't prepared something in advance that will help them to describe step 1, step 2, step 3, or just what a definition of a word means or what it might look like. So I do use a lot of pictures. They laugh, and sometimes the pictures don't come out the way I want them to come out, but they are there as a guide to help them understand what kind of language I'm trying to use. Make sure to use all your senses in learning. Use movement as much as possible. And I know this is such a quality staff that I almost am embarrassed to say anything like this, but using movement, using visual, using auditory, using tactile, using sense, taste, using every sense that they have to help them figure out what their best learning style is. Because I think that's part of the task of middle school is understanding that I learn best when. I learn best when I listen, or I learn best when I write things down. I use my tactile information. I learn best when I listen to it on a recording, or I say it myself. So thinking about the different ways that you can help them bring in different sensory information. I learn best when I color a picture. Using learning strategies. I'm thinking about that one. Verbally highlight and repeat information. This is important. So you're letting them know that some other things you may have been talking about may have been off on a tangent, but this is the most important thing that you will do today. So that verbally highlighting makes a huge difference for students when they are easily distracted, when they've got a lot of verbal information that you're conveying to them and they can't figure out what's important. So just as that microphone can change the temperature or the tone or the intensity, your verbally highlighting can do the same thing. Learning strategies. Be aware that some students have cognitive learning strategies that are not very helpful. So, for example, I may come up to a student and one of their learning strategies is they want to try it on their own several times before you can intervene. So this student may cover up his paper so that you can't see it. Okay, he wants to do it on his own without anybody walking in. But that's not a very helpful learning strategy, especially if the teacher knows that 8 times out of 10, when the student starts a project, he goes off in the wrong direction. So be aware of that student's learning strategy, or sometimes you could call that a protective strategy, because that has to do with embarrassment and self-esteem and making sure that nobody else in the classroom knows exactly what's going on with them. So just kind of keep that in mind. And at the end, I wrote down there, don't allow them to cover their work. And I know there are several students in the building, I can think of 3 or 4 in particular, who will cover their work because they don't want anyone to see it, they don't want anyone else to know. that they're struggling with academic information, they're struggling with following directions. It's embarrassing, it's humiliating. They think that other students are laughing at them, and they think that. And that may or may not be true, probably isn't, but the way that they feel is what we have to honor and work with. So if a student is covering their paper, what I would do is say, very, very frankly, but firmly and kindly, just, you know, the teacher is here to help, or I'm here to help, and I need to see your paper. So, I mean, I don't allow that to happen. I know that does happen sometimes, and students are shy about it. But anyway, that's about happening. Does anybody have any questions about comprehension? Expression. So in the area of expression, I'm working on cueing students to recall words. They might have a difficult time finding words. And I think we've all had those moments where we've had a difficult time thinking of the word for something, or thinking of the name of a celebrity, or thinking of a date, or when something happened. So, but this is a thing that happens with students with language disabilities, but it happens to a much greater degree, and it can be very, very, very frustrating. We have one student in the building who has significant word-finding difficulties, and you can see it in her face that she knows what she wants to say, but she just sort of shakes her head and just can't come up with it. So there are things that you can do in terms of providing some assistance. You don't want to automatically give them the word, but you might describe the word first, and then maybe give them the first sound in the word, and then give them the first syllable for the word. So we're working on cueing them from least to most assistance. Providing sentence starters. If a student is having a difficult time responding in an appropriate format, meaning a lot of my students like to respond with single words, it might help them out if you give them a sentence starter, the first couple of words of the sentence. Word starters are the same kind of thing. Provide graphic organizers for sequences of information. You all do that all the time. This is a very high level quality staff, so I think that happens most of the time. There might be times when we need to tweak graphic organizers. For example, you might want to make sure you have a graphic organizer, but have an example of what you expect the student to do. Give them a little bit more modeling of what they need. But the graphic organizers tend to make a tremendous difference in what the student's able to do. Again, check written assignments to make sure that they're on the right track. Wait for it. Wait for it. The extra time that you give students makes an incredible difference. And I know sometimes people look at that and go, oh, wow, that's really frustrating. We're not just talking about turning in assignments, but I mean just literally waiting for a couple of extra seconds for a student to organize and generate a verbal response or a written response of some kind. It just can be a tremendous difference for that student. It can make a tremendous difference for them. So definitely make sure, it's hard. I know I've talked about this quite a bit with Kelly. Like, we have to count in our heads sometimes from 1 to 10.
I have a student that's we have to wait 10 seconds, and if I don't count the 10 seconds, because it seems like a minute. I mean, it seems like you're waiting a long minute. And, you know, peers are looking at me, everybody's looking at me, but I'm like, and sure enough, by about the 10th second, she'll respond.
Right.
So,
and other
she just
people
needs
will
that
be
processing time.
Exactly, and other people will be jumping in and trying to fill it in for them, and you want to say, whoa, wait a minute, give them a chance, but if you give them plenty of time, they'll eventually be able to get it. And then the other things are verbal sequencing, and two things about remembering that the student has a disability. I know sometimes it's really frustrating when you have students that have language disabilities, and it takes them longer. They're not very organized. They seem like they're giving up pretty easily. And sometimes my teachers, not necessarily these teachers, some teachers might think that they're lazy, that they're not really trying. But in fact, it's just the opposite, that they are really struggling. And that's why you start to see that shutdown behavior. And that's why they need this extra support, so that we can help lift them over that hump and get them to the next level. So keep in mind that the student does have a disability, and it's, I have made sure, especially over the last year or two that all of the students that are on my caseload truly have a disability, and that they are working on specific skills to help move them forward. Skills that won't necessarily always fix the problem, but will help them move forward in life. And then the other thing is that, yes, the student has a disability, but we can't forget that all of these students have specific strengths as well. So it's easy to remember, oh, he has such a hard time understanding the vocabulary, or he can't remember any information for tests. But make sure that you take the time to recognize the gifts that the student brings to the classroom. Maybe the gift is for you as a teacher to think about, how am I delivering this information so that he or she can understand it better? And how does that have an impact on the other students in the classroom? Does that help them to understand the information better as well? Does that make me a better teacher? Is that the gift that they're bringing to this classroom? Maybe the gift is, their ability to do art. Maybe their gift is they are super patient. Some of my language disabled students are the most patient people I have ever seen, because I can tell you that some of the situations that they're in terms of learning would just drive me nuts, absolutely nuts. It would make me so frustrated. But they have learned to compensate and work through it and take their time, and it's just look for your gifts. I guess that's what I'm saying. Just make sure you look for the gifts there. Okay, so I have given everybody the PowerPoint handout and this How Can I Help Students handout, and I've got a cute little quirky video that I'm going to show to you in just a second. I have written down lots of problems that students will have in the classroom, and so right now what I'd like you to do is write down on the other side of the chart what kinds of things might help these students that have language disabilities. Partners are okay.
You have the, that sounds better. Try that.
Is it right around?
Okay.
Is she in the? It was just coming out of the computer.
No, there should be a word.
Hey, Kristen, just ask her whether it's in your crossword checker.
They have immense difficulty typing and understanding language. Common luxury is a lot of us take for granted to comprehend each other rather easily.
Sorry.
Speech, language, communication, understanding. Common luxuries a lot of us take for granted. Programme to comprehend each other rather easily. But what about those who struggle with listening, speaking and understanding? Well, I'm talking about those with specific language impairments, or SLI. Now what is that, you may ask? Well, let me show you. Come on in. Those who have SLI are as able and healthy as any other person, but with one exception. They have enormous difficulty talking and understanding language. Take Darren for instance. Darren is as bright and clever as any other young man of his age, but he's currently struggling with following whatever his teacher is saying.
I could speak out and tell the teacher of my problems,
But you won't.
no.
And why is that? Embarrassment, of course. But if you can't understand what the teacher is saying, then what does that mean for you?
Failed assignments, bad grades, sometimes a copy of the work of the person next to me. I rarely get away with that one.
What causes these problems for you, Dan?
Too much talking with no pauses, no visual clues, complicated vocabulary. I struggle with metaphors and words that mean more than one thing.
Does your teacher know that you have SLI?
No, I hide it pretty good.
Okay.
And that's pretty typical. I hide it pretty good. A lot of our students do that.
Josephine is a clever young lady with many creative talents. And she finds it hard to follow instructions, such as uh-oh. What now, Josephine?
When there's something, I tend to look around to see what other people are doing and try to copy what they are doing.
Yeah, but do you know what everybody else is doing?
No, not really.
Ask the teacher.
Josephine, I spent the last half hour going over all this. Were you not listening? What have you been doing all this time?
I rather not.
What would help?
Or maybe. No, Josephine. Miss, don't you think what you said before comes?
Yes, not a problem.
Or if it comes to it,
Susan's not listening. I'm sure she'll give me help with doing so. That goes for everybody else. They're struggling. Give them a hand.
This is Edward. He has difficulties understanding long or complicated sentences. He doesn't often realise he doesn't understand something. It can then become frustrated and he feels as though he's struggling. Edward doesn't know yet. He's about to have some problems.
Yeah?
But Edward, all you've done is draw and doodle on your notebook.
I can't manage this. I don't know what she's asking me to do.
Alright, calm down. What would help in a situation like this?
Maybe not talking when she writes on the board or has her back to us so I can focus on one thing at a time. I wouldn't be offended if she checked up on me to see if I was keeping up with the work that she was saying. I can get worked up easily. I think it would help if I had a little time alone somewhere, like a library or a study room.
Edward, I have something for you.
What?
It's called Communication Passport. Just give this to your teacher whenever you need to remind her of the difficulties you're facing. Remember friends, SLI varies from person to person, but the key thing is to be open and understanding. Be encouraging and provide that support every step of the way. Speech, language, communication, understanding is precious. It's vital. Have a fine day all.
ahead and take a few minutes with your table group and complete as much as you can the second half of that chart.
Also have something.
First one said pausing, taking a point to check on students. So breaking up, especially if you're lecture.
Yes.
Yeah. I just said slow down or pause and ask. No visual information, I just said visual information.
So no visual.
Like graphic But like a same page. Yeah.
Or like, I mean, like if you're
So maybe
just thinking about like not safe to say closed without
Showing the picture.
Yell louder than
I'm going to give you all about 1 more minute and then we'll go through some tips.
I mean, for like metaphors and stuff. Abstract language. I mean, you can use that and then also make sure that you're being very literal too. Especially
Noise in the class is just like quiet. He also said like a communication class, I don't know if I would go there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Right. Modeling, say. Right. Yeah, that's what we need. I don't know, is it? No, that's what I said. Oh, just
Well, yeah, what do you think?
Don't say it, maybe doing something where they can so, you know, to show the strength.
putting them with
It's in your past.
yeah, we did. It says teacher's response to questions.
I just said individual check-in. Instead of like calling them out, I don't have time to speak for
Yeah.
everyone. I have to go even. Or when I'm even having like a checklist, like, do you understand this? Do you need help?
All right, so we're going to transition back. Hopefully, you got some good ideas and some information about what you can do in the classroom just from the video. But just for the sake of clarity, because I know when you see a video one time, you don't pick up a lot of information. just from my experience. And it helps to kind of review a little bit. So in terms of too much talking and no pauses, what would be a possible suggestion for that?
We said comprehension checks and walk around the room.
Comprehension checks, walk around the room. What else?
Talk slower.
Talk slower.
Pause.
Pause. Yeah. That's one of that's one of those. That it was buried in Grant's tomb kind of question. No visual information.
Or create those bullet points that might list the steps.
So like verbal, that's like a word highlighter is a dot or a dash or something like that. Diagrams, graphics of some kind that'll help explain an idea. Abstract language. You don't have any ideas for? So I have this one expression that nobody at this level ever understands. It's as the crow flies. So as I'm describing as the crow flies, I'm talking to them on the most concrete level that I could ever talk to them. So I'm talking about a bird, and he's going to fly from my house to school. And he's not going to fly on the expressways. He's going to fly just in a straight line to get to school. And at the same time, I might be drawing along with this so that they can understand the idea of as the crow flies. Not that that's used very often, but they begin to understand that words have more underlying meanings than what they see on the surface. So that is my example of scaffolding, giving them a very specific, concrete idea of what something might mean, and then giving them the direct explanation, which is it's the fastest way to go. And then being careful with multiple meaning words. I can't tell you how many times they're thinking what I'm thinking, but there are 3 or 4 definitions for the same word, and they're thinking of the 4th one that you haven't thought of yet. So definitely keep that in mind. Noise in the classroom.
Work in a quiet location.
Work in a quiet location. How can you do that with some of our students? What are some options? Library. Yeah, intervention.
Listen to music.
Headphones. Music. Even in the hallway. I think for some kids, if they just need a few minutes to quietly focus on something and there's nobody else out in the hallway, I know that sometimes that doesn't happen, but it can definitely make a difference. Negative remarks from students, the S word. Do y'all know what the S word is? You did, yeah. Okay, yes.
Which? I heard speech and stuff.
Stupid. That's the S word when it comes to, education.
The S word and the R word.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
My peers are doing a research project on the R word this year and how to get away from that.
So what can you do as a teacher in a classroom when you hear something like that?
Community atmosphere.
Community atmosphere, absolutely. Talking about supporting each other, supporting out, looking at our gifts, looking at everybody's gifts, that everybody has different strengths. Some folks have real good academic strengths. Some people have amazing athletic strengths, musical strengths. Some people have language strengths. Some people have speech strengths. Some people, have art strengths. So you have to look at what the strengths are. And everybody that goes to the school has weaknesses as well. It just so happens that some people's weaknesses are a little bit more visible than others. So
The other thing to do is with students that know things and get things really quickly, sometimes I tell students like that, the best way to really learn something is to teach it to somebody else when you pick it up very quickly, and it would be really helpful since you got that so quickly.
absolutely. Is the S word allowed in the building?
No.
It's okay. And it is a form of bullying, and I do think it is, at the very least, the first tier of redirection. We're going to talk about it, and that's not an appropriate word, et cetera. And then their second experience, he may escalate a little bit. So, I definitely think that is a form of bullying, and we need to be aware of that. We need to be educating our students who are not aware of that. So, keep up with that. Teachers' response to questions, and I think a lot of people were confused about what this was. Sometimes teachers are in a hurry to get through something. They have more information that they want to deliver. They've just given you all that information, and then the student raises their hand and they ask for it again. And so it's the teacher's response is, didn't I just say that? Didn't I just explain that to you? Were you listening? So we have to be really careful about the comments that we make, because it makes that person in the classroom feel very small and less likely to ask a question the next time. Complex information and directions, I'm speeding through these. Break them down, repeat them, rephrase them, have the student repeat them to you so that they understand them. Embarrassment, go down to their level physically. Speak to them as a human being and let them know that everybody feels embarrassment. Let them know that the more that they avoid engaging and asking questions, the more mistakes they're going to make, and that ultimately that's going to lead to more embarrassment. So it might be easier for them to just kind of try it a couple of times and see what happens, and then support them in that process as much as possible. And then the last thing is, one of the most difficult things that I deal with is that the student does not understand that they don't understand. But did anybody have suggestions for that?
Take and hang on to the possible thread of what they do understand.
Start where they are. Absolutely, start where they are and guide them up step by step so that they understand that they didn't hear it quite correctly. Emphasize key words. So they may have drawn a picture when you ask them to write an explanation. Okay, I'm getting the signal. So I'm going to move on from this and just real quickly breeze through some other things because I think you're familiar with them. But if you have any questions about strategies that you can use in the classroom, feel free to come and chat with me. Articulation, individual sounds, I've kind of talked about this already, how they make the sounds. I teach them in my classroom how to make the sounds. I teach them why it's important for them to practice the sounds. And I also teach them that practice makes permanent, not perfect. And I know a lot of people think that practice makes perfect. It doesn't when you're doing something wrong. So if I am trying to learn to play saxophone, I'm not going to press the wrong buttons every single time and expect to learn how to play it proficiently. So we talk about how if they continue to practice saying the sounds incorrectly, they are making that incorrect production permanent. And so once we've worked on getting those sounds down pat, and they can say them at the word, sentence, paragraph, and conversation level, and I feel like they're pretty solid with that. I'm going to come to a bunch of teachers and I'm going to say, hey, this kiddo needs some practice in his classroom. And I've done it a couple of times with the S sound. I'll say, can you use the cue to remind them before they have to speak to use their sound correctly? Or I might have a little chit or a piece of paper to put down so that you can remind them before they're speaking assignments to speak correctly. And strategies for the classroom. I'm going to let you read through those because I'm running out of time. Fluency. We have several students in this building who stutter, and we provide a lot of support for them. I see them on a weekly basis, and we talk about strategies. We talk about the emotional, cognitive part of stuttering quite a bit. If you have any students who stutter, and you're not certain about whether they can do a presentation in your class, or you're not certain about what strategies they're using to help themselves be fluent, just check in with me. Also check in on their supplementary aids and services and see if there are some ideas there for you. The other option is to check in with the student and to ask them what would help them to be successful. And pragmatics and social language. I think I'm going to do a little information on pragmatics in the next couple of months, and come up and talk to some teachers about strategy for pragmatic language and social interaction. So if you're interested in that, I'd love to talk to you about that. But basically, understanding social rules, what's okay, what's not okay. I'm very explicit about how those rules work, that you have to start a conversation. You just can't just walk into the room and start talking. You have to say hi to someone, greet them. You go back and forth in conversations. It's not only your topic of interest, but it's a group, it's what the other person shares an interest in. It's using a filter. We talk about using a filter, why that's important, why you don't want to just say what comes to the first thing that comes to mind. And that your conversations shouldn't just be about you and your topic of interest, your main topic of interest. So we do a lot on problem solving, and we do a little bit on emotional regulation, like how big a problem is and how big you should react. And I will let you take a look at those. And then the highly structured classroom is the last one I'm going to talk about. But basically, that's Kelly's Kids. They require a lot of support, and I'm going to emphasize a couple of things that I think just need emphasizing. In Kelly's room, she does a lot of structuring of assignments to make sure that they are doable and meaningful for her students. So if you have any questions in your classroom about whether a student can do something or how they can meaningfully interact in your classroom and participate in academic assignments, check in with Kelly, check in with me. A student shouldn't be sitting there drawing pictures or just kind of playing around on the internet. They need to be actively and meaningfully engaged and communicating in that environment. So I just wanted to re-emphasize that, because that's kind of easier just to let them go and do their own thing. And I know you've got a lot of other things going on, so it makes it difficult for you to focus on that. But if you engage us, we will definitely help out.
Yeah, we can create the materials and then give them to the peer partner, so it's not necessarily the adult that's having to sit and take the time with that student. My peers are really good at sort of implementing things if we create them. So if you'll just let me know, we'll give you any materials you need for your room.
And then the other thing that I wanted to plug in for was that if you don't understand a student, especially if it's a student that you know has a communication disorder, and then I really feel strongly that you need to give them some feedback about that. You can't just say, oh, okay, because that doesn't take them to the next step, which is understanding that they're having difficulty being understood by others. And once they start getting that feedback from people that they don't understand them, then they start to make an effort to change what they're doing so that they can be understood. Or they're more open to using the tools that we're providing for them to communicate more clearly. So anyway, I'm going to stop there because I went on too far. But if I come in, last thing I promise, this will be it. If I come into your classroom and I'm doing a behavior observation, sometimes I don't always have an opportunity to contact you in advance. But if I do, I am there to watch that student and see what kinds of difficulties they're having communicating. So if you have an opportunity to call on them, please do call them so that I can observe that. So thank you. I appreciate your attention very much.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay. A little bit about calendar.
Previously, I've just sent out this information over email, but this year's calendars are a little bit more difficult, and wanted to explain a little bit about them. I hope I made enough copies, and if not, then I can certainly get you one. You're going to receive 4 calendars, and the first 2 are options for next year. So all the major breaks have already been set for next year. These are just the specific days as to opening, closing, early release, that sort of thing. And then the last 2 in the group, and I've circled them at the top, are for the major breaks for 18-19 school year. One thing I like that our district does is that they put out those breaks ahead of time and a year in advance, so parents can plan and be able to make those vacation plans. Starting with 17-18, you're going to see 2 different options. There not enough? Okay, I can give these. There's two different options. The main difference between the first two options, or between the two options, is that Mr. Schultz has made very clear that he wants to have teachers in the buildings as much as possible and not be taken out for things like PD and that sort of thing. So one thing that he is trying to do is to implement these in-school meeting days. So instead of just having the 2 hours where we meet as an ERD just with our school PLC, that we would have some full day opportunities to meet across the district as well, and not just wait until the summer to meet with our district folks as well. So the two options, option A has 3 ERDs, early release, and then 3 full day releases. Now, one thing that is on the calendar, they are identified as Wednesdays, but that is not necessarily going to be the case. One thing Mr. Schultz has also said is that he would like to move those full release days to either a Friday or a Monday to make it a 3-day weekend for the kids. Now, we would still, of course, have to be there those days, but for the kids anyway, it would be that 3-day weekend. So listed on the calendar, they're on Wednesdays still, but it's just kind of like a placeholder as a day. It's not necessarily going to be that exact day. But the difference between the two calendars is that on option A, there's 3 early release and 3 full release. And then option B, there's 5 full release and no early release. Yes?
Just to be sure, okay, never mind. It's a paid day. It's not a day to get PD.
Correct. It is not PD. It is a paid work day.
So, because I'm noticing that the students would actually go to school 2 days less on option B. When you look at the back of the page where it says number of student days, so on the first calendar, number of student days is 172, but on B it's 170. So we would have students 2 less days. Am I understanding?
Because those early release days.
Correct.
Because of those early release days, they wouldn't be early release days, they would be.
Which is why on option B also requires adding 5 minutes to elementary and Buckner alternative because of those days. Otherwise, they have to be able to make hours.
So we would have 2 less instructional days with our students if we went with option B.
Correct.
Okay.
Something that's not on here is that at the last calendar committee meeting is that one of the elementary school teachers mentioned adding in a conference day, because we are paid for conference hours, adding in and having 1 conference day rather than the 2 that we do necessarily, or to break it up like that. That's not on here. It was a suggestion. So if that is something that you would want to consider, then on the survey that I send out probably tomorrow, hopefully, then please put that in the feedback if that's something that you would want to include. That would add an additional day onto our school year, so keep that in mind as well for everyone. Correct. So we would have 1 full conference day instead of 6 hours whenever we as teachers wanted to do it. Any other? Yes.
And it looks like because of all of our construction, we're starting back early again?
Yes, we are back to starting on the 9th instead of the following on the 16th. So, yes, no construction plans for next year. Good time. Okay, so. Yeah. Okay, so moving on to the 18-19, which is the major break. So first thing, you will not see opening and closing days because those are not set until we find out our numbers and until the breaks are set, because then that all can depend on that. So there's a couple of things to notice with the 18-19 calendar. The first thing is that it's not a full 2 weeks. Now, keep in mind that nothing is set in stone here, guys. That's why we have the calendar committee, is because we can then go and make those recommendations to say, okay, well, we want off the 20th and 21st, and then be able to come back then on the 2nd if we want those 2 full weeks. We can say that. Doesn't mean it'll always get approved by the board, but that can be part of our recommendation. So everything is flexible, everything can be adjusted. Okay? So yes, right now it is basically a week and a half that we are released on the 21st before that Christmas break. and then we come back. Now, we could technically come back the 2nd, so you could take that day off if you wanted to come back earlier.
Why is this?
Why?
Yes.
Why come back on 2nd? Or
No, why is it a week?
because of the way Christmas falls.
You still get our 10 days off.
Yeah, or why can't that be done on the 19th? Like, is there-
Yeah, why can't we do, yeah.
We can't.
So those are the things that we need to say if we're
Correct.
interested.
Yes.
If we want that time.
This is the proposed. If you want to go to half weeks, then we can propose that. Board may not approve it, but we can propose 2 half weeks instead of the full.
And that proposal will come when you send out your survey.
Correct.
Okay, so when Amy sends out her survey, make your voices known.
Yeah.
Why does option A in 1819 only have 145 students?
Because we don't know the open starting and closing dates yet.
But option B doesn't know those either, and then has 175.
That's Michael.
Wait, why don't we have a fall break?
Okay, the other major thing that to consider between option 1 and option 2 for 1819 is no fall break. Option 1 has a fall break, option 2 does not. So that is something else to consider in your choice and in the survey that I send out. Last year when I sent out the survey, I got 11 responses. So it's hard for me to go back to the calendar committee and say North Oldham Middle School wants this because it ended up being split. And I was the deciding vote. I'll be totally honest, I was the 12th person, so it ended up being about 6 and 6 to having no fall break versus fall break. So I'm coming back saying 50% of my school wanted one thing. So I am your representative, but I need to represent you, and I can't do that unless you guys tell me what you want. So please, please, please respond to the survey that I send out tomorrow. Anything else? Good night,
All right, and last thing, Jenna has one plug and then we're out of here.
Just real quick, seminar, I only had 19 responses. So if you have not responded, please go and do that, or I'll just sign you up. We can have an open session for your content. But I need that tonight because I'm gonna have to go home and work on it because I am out tomorrow morning at the annex. So I need to be able to get that together and wrapped up tonight so it's ready to go for students to do it tomorrow. So tomorrow during Compass, I'll send this out in an email, but 8:45, 6th grade, 8:55, 7th grade to sign, and then 8th grade, 7th grade, 8:55, and then 8th grade will be like 9:05, so they can just go on and sign in, and then that way when I get back, I can send the list out. So, other than that, yeah, and if you have a close, I think I have everybody's list from closed except for one, so if you need to send me closed list students, please do so.
Thank you so much. Have a great day.